Sejam bem-vindos a mais um Revisa aí em inglês, tudo bom? E aí, professor, você já estudou sua lição? Ainda não? Então, revisa aí. Hello guys, are you ready for one more lesson? Lesson 2, the message of Hebrews in Portuguese. Tudo bem, pessoal? Preparados para mais uma lição, a mensagem de Hebreus? Vamos então chamar o nosso amigo Arthur. Vamos lá, Arthur, seja bem-vindo. How are you?
Valeu, obrigado. I'm fine. É muito legal estar aqui com vocês mais uma semana para a segunda lição de Hebreus.
Uma lição bem bonita, né? Que vai falar sobre Cristo. Muito bom. Well, let me start with a prayer. And after the prayer, we will show the display and the 5 main points of this lesson. Em português. Muito bem, pessoal, nós vamos começar essa lição com uma oração e depois vamos apresentar os 5 pontos mais importantes dessa lição, tá bom? Vamos orar em português e depois vamos para o conteúdo em inglês. Oremos. Obrigado, Senhor, por mais essa oportunidade de poder estudar esta lição maravilhosa de Hebreus. Que esta mensagem possa encontrar no nosso coração um lugar para aprendermos cada vez mais de Ti e da Sua palavra. É o que pedimos e agradecemos em nome de Jesus. Amém. Let's go to share my display with you. This is so nice. Let me... Yes, here it's ready to show this note for you. The message of Hebrews, I'd like to begin with the memory text in chapter 8, verse 1 says, "This is the main point of the things we are saying. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens." So in this memory text, we are present in the curious figure about Jesus that says Jesus is our high priest, a kind of title, because in this lesson we will study 5 ways to present Jesus for us, right? Em português, neste verso para memorizar, né, o ponto mais importante daquilo que estamos dizendo é que nós temos tal sumo sacerdote que ele está sentado à direita de Deus, à direita do trono, né, da majestade dos céus. E ele, Jesus, se apresenta em um tipo de figura que é a figura do sumo sacerdote. Okay? In English, are you ready? Well, this introduction in English, which is the main message of Hebrews? Jesus. Jesus is the main subject of this book. So he fulfilled all the promises God had made in the Old Covenant, and he represents the realities of the New Covenant. So that's the point. That's the key point of our lesson. How is Jesus introduced in Hebrews? Em português. Bem, qual é a principal mensagem de Hebreus? A principal mensagem de Hebreus é Jesus. Jesus é o assunto principal deste livro. Ele cumpriu todas as promessas que Deus fez na antiga aliança e agora ele representa essas realidades da nova aliança. E como Jesus é apresentado, como ele é introduzido em Hebreus. Are you ready in English? Well, how is Jesus introduced in Hebrews? 5 points. First point, Jesus is our King, or Jesus is the King. Jesus is the representative. Jesus is our representative. Jesus is our champion. Jesus is our high priest. And Jesus is our mediator of the better covenant. Remember, Jesus is not only our, Jesus is the king, representative, champion, high priest, and mediator of a better covenant. Do you understand? In Portuguese, Jesus, então, ele é introduzido, né, apresentado como o nosso rei, o nosso mediador, o nosso campeão, o nosso sumo sacerdote e mediador de uma melhor, uma superior aliança, ok? Let's go, continue, go on Sunday's lesson. Jesus is our king. God gave Adam and Eve dominion over this world, Genesis 1:28. Satan usurped it when they sinned. God promised that a seed would restore humanity. So this is the first promise on the Bible, the prophetic messianic prophecy on the Bible. Later, David was promised that a king from his lineage, the seed, would govern the world and free it from the power of the enemy. So, what's the problem with this point? As our king, Jesus fulfilled not the messianic prophecy on Genesis as a seed, but this kind of seed has an important role in the salvation plan. One point is the majesty. Well, the first identity of Jesus is his identity of king. So this is very interesting. The third last point of this note shows God installed Jesus as his son on chapter 1, verse 5. He introduced Jesus to the heavenly court. He enthronized him and gave him power, verse 13. So, em português, now. Ele é o nosso rei. Essa é a primeira visão que nós temos de Jesus, né? Deus deu a Adão e Eva domínio sobre esse mundo, Satanás usurpou. Então, a primeira profecia messiânica tem a ver com esta semente que viria da Eva, viria desta mulher. E é importante entender que esta semente tem o primeiro papel dela como essa majestade, como rei, ok? Deus, então, instalou Jesus como seu filho, introduziu Jesus nas cortes celestiais e ele foi entronizado e deu a ele poder. São características importantes para que você entenda que Jesus ele tem aspectos divinos, ok? Are you ready? Arthur, do you want to make a commentary? Do you want to make opinion?
First of all, there are two parrots. Tem duas maritacas aqui no muro, gritando sem parar. About Jesus being our king, we're going to talk a little bit more about that throughout the lesson. And about him being our champion and our high priest too. It's just really nice to see him with at first seem to be such different roles, but when we look at it, they're quite similar. And even if they have different roles with different roles, or missions with different roles. I don't know, it's just really interesting to see Jesus fulfilling all that when we go to the New Testament.
All right, this is very interesting because the figure, this aspect of king, the majesty of Jesus is presented in book of Hebrews, but this kind of figure, this kind of aspect is found in Old Testament, right? Like Isaiah, for instance, right? So, are you ready in Portuguese? Muito bem, pessoal. Arthur, então, mostrando aqui algumas ideias de que Jesus ele tem esse aspecto de rei praticamente em todo o Novo Testamento e, claro, puxando essa ideia do Antigo Testamento. Beleza? Muito bem, let's go. Sunday's lesson. Let me share my display. Jesus is our representative. The second point. How is Jesus introduced in the book of Hebrews? First, as our king. The second point, our mediator representative, right? The relation between God and Israel is a eternal relation in the covenant aspect, in road covenant, right? A helper is or mediator representative is very important part of the covenant between God and Israel. The helper, the representative, this mediator makes possible between Israel and God, because Jesus fulfilled the blessing, the protection, and promises in this role as our mediator, as our representative. Old Testament shows us that many kings from the line of David were not loyal to God, but Jesus was loyal to God. Do you understand? There is another good news. God sent his son to be born as the son of David. So Jesus lived a life of perfect obedience to God and his law. And among the Jews, Jesus is well known as son of David. Em português, como nosso mediador, né, o nosso auxiliador, nosso representante, Jesus ele tem um papel importante nesta aliança, porque ele possibilitou isso através do cumprimento das promessas de bênçãos e proteção que faz parte do seu papel como mediador. E uma notícia ruim é que no Antigo Testamento muitos reis que eram filhos de Davi, né, dessa linhagem, não foram leais a Deus, mas Jesus foi. Deus enviou seu filho e ele foi perfeitamente obediente à sua lei. In English, so in this my display, the second column, we will read, Jesus was perfectly faithful, Hebrews 3:6. That's why Jesus is our representative. The promises that God made to his people were fulfilled through Jesus, because Jesus obeyed the law, 100% loyal to God. So God's blessings flow through him. In português, como o nosso representante, ele foi perfeitamente obediente, né, a Deus, e essa obediência fez com que ele realmente pudesse ter essa aceitação, esse respeito, para que ele fosse aceito como o nosso representante, o nosso mediador. Então, uma segunda característica, né? Jesus, ele foi rei e mediador. Arthur, one more commentary, one more opinion.
I think it's, as I was saying before, the roles of a mediator and a high priest and also a king and all those and a champion are very intertwined. It seems like at all moments in Bible and in the Bible where one of these roles appear, those concepts feel a little mixed up. We're talking more about this on Tuesday's lesson, I guess, when we're mentioning the story of David and Goliath. But that's one example where where a man who would be a king was being a kind of representative of his people in that fight. It's really interesting how all those things are mixed together, and yeah, I just think it's already really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Em português, o Arthur ele falou que esses conceitos eles estão um pouquinho misturados, né? Como nosso representante ou mediador, como rei, e como filho de Davi é a introdução, a deixa para falar da lição de terça-feira. Então, vamos para a lição de terça-feira, a terceira característica de Jesus em Hebreus. Arthur, are you ready?
So on Tuesday's lesson, we're looking a little bit to a Jesus that fulfills the role of our champion. We can see, for example, in 1 Samuel 8, that the Israelites wanted a king so they could be like the other nations, a king that would lead them and bring them to victory over their enemies. They had forgotten God was their king and wanted someone to be their worldly champion, a champion in the patterns of this world. So, but when Jesus came, he wasn't a warrior, nor he defeated Israel's earthly enemies. But he is the greatest among all champions. Through him, all who believe can be blessed by the victory he had over death itself. So he is our champion, not in the sense of beating or defeating our enemies in the physical sense, but he is our champion over death, which is a victory much greater. As David alone, as we were just talking about, fought Goliath, and that brought victory to the whole Israel because David represented all Israel. Jesus alone faced everything predicted by the law and the prophets, and he, representing all of us sinners, brought victory to the whole world. So as Christians, we might often think that we're facing Satan or temptation or sin alone. It is true that we're in war against principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness, and spiritual hosts of wickedness, as we see in Ephesians 6. But our mission is not to fight this fight alone. It's to wear the armor of God, to understand that he fights our battles and he brings us victory. We must put on the armor and follow our champions, and follow our champion, which is Jesus, and not the champions of the world. God himself is our champion and we should follow him instead of aimlessly throwing punches and fighting for ourselves. So this is the champion that we have. This is the champion that Jesus is. This is the champion that the lesson brought us this week, and this is the only champion we will ever need. That is Tuesday's lesson.
So nice. Thank you very much, Em português, pessoal, você percebeu? O Arthur ele trabalhou assim bem abrangente a lição, falando que Jesus ele tem essa figura de Davi como sendo um tipo, né, uma base para ser o nosso campeão, ou seja, existe uma garantia de que haverá vitória, mas também existe a garantia da luta, né? Ou seja, nós também passamos por uma luta, senão a gente vai vencer o quê, né? Então, esse aspecto da lição eu achei curiosíssimo, foi muito bom. Ok? Podemos continuar? Are you ready?
Yes, we can.
So the
Yes.
lesson go on.
So in Wednesday's lesson, we'll take a look at Jesus as our high priest. And thanks to the Psalm 110, we understand that the promised Davidic king, Jesus Christ, is our priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. And among the functions of a priest, we can find that he is or should be a mediator, as we're talking about, between God and his people. He knows how to offer acceptable offerings to God, so he offers sacrifices on behalf of human beings. He is an expert in the law, so he teaches the people the meaning and how to apply the commandments of God. And he has the responsibility of blessing in the name of God, in the name of Yahweh. Through him, God's goodwill reaches humans. So he's literally this channel, this mediator, this representative. The high priest, I think it's the most complete image of a mediator. And it really is amazing how when we read the New Testament, we see Jesus perfectly fulfilling each and every one of these functions of a priest that we see on the Old Testament. So in the Torah and Leviticus and Deuteronomy, we see a lot of this, a lot of the functions of a priest, of the high priest. And it's very interesting how Jesus fulfills all that. He does mediate between God and his people. He knows how to offer the acceptable offerings to God. He is an expert in the law, and he teaches it to the ones around him. And he understands that he has this responsibility of blessing in the name of God. Also, one very important thing to remember is that as written in 1 Peter 2:9, we are a royal priesthood. Because of this, we can approach God in his sanctuary through prayer with confidence, as we can see in Hebrews, which is a great privilege. But along with this incredible privilege comes a great responsibility too. We are called to much fulfill, to follow the steps of Jesus. He is our high priest. We are royal priesthood. So what should we do? We should preach Jesus Christ and present him as our mediator. We should offer sacrifices of praise and good work, of obedience. We should teach that. We should teach what Jesus, our high priest, teaches us. What he taught us, we should also teach. And we should be a blessing to our neighbors. We should bless in the name of God. We should be this blessing. So I think the great lesson we take from Wednesday's lesson is that we have this incredible privilege of the opportunity to come closer to God, to approach him, his presence. And also this beautiful responsibility of bringing Jesus and bringing this whole idea of priesthood to life. And yeah, that's it. That's Wednesday's lesson too.
Thank you very much. Em português, no outro comentário eu falei, nem coloquei minha imagem, né? Agora estou colocando aqui. Muito bom, Arthur, ele lembrou que Cristo é o nosso sumo sacerdote, esse é um papel muito importante. Outros sacerdotes ajudaram a entender isso, embora os sacerdotes foram finitos, mas ele tocou num assunto que eu achei legal. O Arthur disse que nós somos nação santa, povo santo, então ele tentou colocar a ideia de que Cristo ele tem essa responsabilidade, mas nós também precisamos entender o nosso papel e a nossa responsabilidade. É mais ou menos isso, Arthur? Ok. Thursday lesson. Ok. Thursday lesson. Jesus is our mediator, representative of a better covenant, right? After his resurrection, Jesus was ascended to heaven. And what does Jesus is do in heaven right now? So in Hebrews chapter 8 to 10, shows us the work that Jesus does for us under the new covenant, right? So the priests that Arthur talked about also served in a temple that was only a copy of a temple in heaven. Now Jesus works for us in the temple in heaven, so in original temple. So only his blood can make us clean. And his blood only functions, only works at this original temple in heaven, right? So when Jesus became our high priest or top spiritual leader, he made a new way for us to go to God. This way is called new covenant. But this new covenant begins with your decision, with my decision. Accept the blood of Jesus to lead us to this original temple, right? So let me share my display, my last display in this lesson. I like to make a parallel with these two columns, Old Covenant and New Covenant. So we can read the first line, Old Covenant was a shadow, earthly sanctuary. On New Covenant is a heavenly sanctuary, the reality, not a shadow. In Old Covenant, was inaugurated with the blood of animals, but New Covenant inaugurated with the blood of Christ. In Old Covenant, sacrifices that didn't perfect anyone. New Covenant sacrifice that perfects us. In Old Covenant, many sacrifices. In New Covenant, one sacrifice. Old Covenant, mortal priests. In New Covenant, immortal priest. Old Covenant, imperfect priests. In New Covenant, perfect priests. So according to Hebrews, let me share my display. God made the Old Covenant works without Jesus. And in the New Covenant, this works with Jesus. In Desires of Ages, Ellen White, on page 165, wrote, everything in Jewish temple shows Jesus' work in heaven. Interesting. Jesus is the life of the temple. The animal gifts show the death of Jesus on the cross. The work done by the priests show the future work of Jesus. Together, these things showed how the death of Jesus saves human. So interesting. This better comparison, this better parallel between the old and new covenant, because the old covenant shows the functionality of the salvation plan and the death of Jesus on the cross. So after the death, after the resurrection, the new phase, a new aspect, a new step, Jesus fulfilled only by his blood. So this aspect, this new step is called new covenant. Em português, bom, vocês perceberam que Hebreus 8 a 10 trabalha bastante, né, com esse aspecto da nova aliança. Os líderes religiosos, né, os sacerdotes, eles apontavam, né, para o trabalho de Jesus através dos sangues dos animais, mas apenas o sangue de Jesus é capaz de trabalhar. E eu mostrei para vocês que os sacerdotes trabalhavam no templo que representava o templo original. Então Jesus ele já foi e está trabalhando no templo original. E eu mostrei então aquela tabela com algumas características da velha e da nova aliança. Muito interessante, é um aspecto didático. E eu quis mostrar então para vocês a citação de Ellen White, que tudo no templo judeu mostrava a obra de Jesus no céu. Então, isso está no Desejado de Todas as Nações, página 165. Muito bem. Podemos terminar, Arthur?
Podemos.
Ok. Mais alguma opinião? Algum comentário?
Eu acho que eu vou começar a me repetir muito, mas eu realmente acho muito interessante como a gente vê, que nem você comentou agora, né, na lição de quinta-feira, as sombras, as imagens e a realidade, o que elas representam. Toda essa questão do santuário, da missão, da função, do papel de Jesus, tanto na salvação quanto no santuário, está tudo ali misturado, né? Eu acho muito interessante como tudo isso, que nem eu tô falando sem parar, né? Que nem eu falei, eu tô começar a me repetir, mas é muito interessante para mim como tudo se encaixa, como tudo se mistura e como tudo é muito evidente quando a gente olha para Jesus e a gente se a gente já estudou, por exemplo, a gente saindo da lição de Deuteronômio, né? A gente quase que transportado para lá, quando a gente lê sobre Jesus do Novo Testamento, a gente volta para lá e se lembra e faz várias conexões. É isso, acho que era esse meu comentário.
Muito obrigado. In English, to complete our lesson, para fechar nossa lição only in English, are you ready to the final question?
Yes, I am.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure to me and Arthur make the second lesson. The message of Hebrews shows the 5 important aspects of Jesus in this book. I'd like to invite you to study this important lesson. So, I studied the lesson.
Do you?